Hey Rip City, this is Deandre Ayton, and it's time to open the briefcase with Casey Holdall.
Greetings, Blazer fans, and welcome to The Briefcase, episode 113 of The Briefcase. I'm your host, Casey Holdall, and the preseason is finally over for the Portland Trail Blazers. Actually, only about a week of preseason, so saying finally probably isn't correct, but the preseason is over. Trailblazers finished preseason with a 3-1 record, got better as the preseason went on, capped it off on Friday by beating the Utah Jazz in blowout fashion. We got a little bit of an insight in the direction I think Chauncey Billups is going to go in terms of the lineup, which we actually talked about on the last edition of The Briefcase, came to fruition at the end of preseason. I think we're probably going to see it at the beginning of the regular season. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about some of the small contract news that's happened, some new injuries, and we'll hear from Donovan Clingan about his first season, training camp, what he's been working on, buying waiters, and the Kling Kong nickname on this edition of The Briefcase. Well, as I mentioned, the Trailblazers finished off their preseason schedule by beating the Utah Jazz 124-86 at Moda Center Friday night in a very enjoyable game. I saw multiple people saying that they thought that preseason game was one of the more fun Trailblazers games they've seen in a while. First chance to see Anfernee Simons, Toumani Camara, Deni Avdija, and Jerami Grant all on the floor at the same time. Deandre Ayton didn't play in that game due to rest. Donovan Clingan got the start, had his best game of the preseason as well. And we talked about on the last edition of The Briefcase that starting lineup, and particularly the backcourt for the starting lineup, and whether they were going to go with Scoot and Ant while Shaedon Sharpe is out, or if they were going to try Toumani Camara, which is what they did versus the Kings, or at least Toumani Camara started at the 2 alongside Scoot versus the Kings with Deni Avdija at the 3. It worked pretty well versus the Kings, and with the addition of Anfernee Simons in the starting lineup versus the Utah Jazz, it worked great. Trailblazers went up big early, ended up winning that game by, 38 points. Portland started the game by outscoring the Jazz by 12 in the first quarter and then 27 in the first half. And I think we're seeing with that starting lineup, particularly with Toumani and Deni together, you have a lot of size with Toumani at, 6'7", 6'8", Deni at 6'8", 6'9". Both those guys able to handle the ball a little bit. You got Toumani pressuring full court. You got Deni playing stout defense. You add in Jerami Grant as well, a 40% three-point shooter. Deni's a pretty good three-point shooter. Toumani's an improving three-point shooter. Anfernee Simons is a great three-point shooter, so you're able to spread the floor at that point. And I think it just gives the team a level of size in that starting lineup that they haven't had in I don't even know how long. And that's one of the things Chauncey Billups has talked about throughout the years during his time in Portland is needing more size and not necessarily having the personnel to play with some of the lineups that he'd like to see play. And while you would like to probably see Scoot out there, you want to get Scoot minutes in his second season. I think the team also knows as well that, starting Ant and Scoot together, you're already starting a really small backcourt there, and that's going to put some pressure on the rest of the team as well. So at least until Shaedon is ready to go, and assuming that Shaedon does come in and take that starting spot, which is something I would assume will happen when he's healthy. But while Shaedon is out, you don't really have anyone at the 2 who you really feel like is laid claim to that spot other than Toumani. And Toumani is probably more of a 3, but I think he played 2 in college, and he's obviously got the size and the athleticism to play the 2. A lot of times the position that you are is the position that you defend in the NBA, and Toumani's the guy that can defend, 4 positions. So you can claim, he's not a point guard, but you can claim 2, 3, 4. And I think as of right now with Toumani in that 2-3 slot, with Deni in that 3-4 slot, same with Jerami. I think it just gives the Blazers a lot of options in that starting lineup, particularly defensively, that they just haven't had a whole lot recently. So I think, Chauncey was a bit non-committal when asked whether or not that was going to be the starting lineup plus Deandre Ayton once the regular season starts on Wednesday. I feel pretty confident that that is the direction it's going to go. I kind of waffled on it on the last edition, but seeing it in the Kings game and then seeing it in the Jazz game with Anfernee Simons and as how well they played in that Utah game, and granted, it's preseason. That was the last preseason game for the Utah Jazz too. They played 6 preseason games. Portland only played 4, so probably not playing maybe the same caliber of lineups they would have played maybe earlier in the preseason. But nonetheless, Portland came out, played great, and I think that the things that Chauncey would like to see out of his starting lineup is what he saw in that starting lineup versus the Jazz on Friday night. So my expectation is Anfernee Simons, Toumani Camara, Deni Avdija, Jerami Grant, and Deandre Ayton will be the starting lineup come Wednesday versus the Golden State Warriors. Again, Chauncey didn't say that explicitly. They do have a couple days of practice, so maybe things shake out differently there, but that's my expectation at this point because they played so well in that game versus the Jazz. Donovan Clingan played really well too. Probably not ready to get starts just yet, particularly with DeAndre Ayton, who has looked really good in preseason. That's Donovan's still going to need some time there to get up to speed and to really get into the fitness he's going to need to get into for the NBA. And also it's going to be tough to beat out a guy like DeAndre Ayton because he's a very good center. But, he played really well in that game as well. So you also feel really good about him coming in those secondary lineups at this point, backing up DeAndre Ayton, at least until a guy like Robert Williams, who we will talk about here in a second. Not entirely sure what his status is going to be for the opener. And you have Duop, who gives you something different, who's been playing it as kind of the third center throughout preseason. So I imagine that's going to continue on as well. But getting back to that Jazz game a little bit, the Trailblazers in that Jazz game, unlike their other preseason games, they basically played it the way you would expect them to play through at least three quarters. The first three preseason games, they played kind of Jerami and DeAndre the first half and then sat them in the second half. In the game versus the Jazz, they played those guys through the third quarter. Really didn't need to because they had already built such a big lead. The game was basically effectively over anyways, but you want to get those reps, particularly with only 4 preseason games. First chance for Anfernee Simons to get into a preseason game in the exhibition season, so you knew he was going to play more minutes than you probably expect he would otherwise. And they played really well. Jerami Grant went 7 of 11 from the field and 3 of 4 from 3 for 18 points, while also having 7 assists, 3 rebounds, 3 steals, 3 blocks in 23 minutes. A lot of blocks in that lineup as well, too. And again, when you have Jerami and Deni and Toumani, and then you throw in Donovan in there as well, that's a lot of length and a lot of ability to block shots. And I think, again, that's something that for a team that's talked a lot about wanting to get better defensively throughout the last 12, 15 years, that's something, if you want to see it happen, you got to put the players on the floor that can do those kind of things. And I think we saw a bit of that on Friday versus the Jazz. And again, I expect that that's going to be something they're going to try out throughout the season. Clingan got the start in place of DeAndre Ayton, who just sat out due to rest. I actually talked to DeAndre at shoot-around before the game on Friday. He went through a extended workout. He looks great. 3-point shot looks fantastic. We'll be talking to DeAndre in an upcoming edition of the Briefcase as well. Really like where DeAndre's at, both in terms of his fitness and his kind of headspace right now. But he rested that game. Donovan got the start, went 7 of 12 from the field for 14 points, 20 rebounds, 10 offensive rebounds, 10 defensive rebounds. If you're splitting your rebounds half and half, you're doing a great job. Obviously, offensive rebounds incredibly important for second chance points. I got quite a few of those in that game. Donovan Clingan, a load to deal with even at his young age. Second straight double-double for Donovan in 24 minutes. Also had 4 blocks, 4 assists in his first start in preseason. And again, I think that Donovan is a guy who is probably going to force the team's hand to play him more than maybe they had expected to play him early on in the season. Again, he's a young center. It's tough to be a center in the NBA regardless, particularly when you're young, particularly when you're trying to get up to speed with the pace and all the things they're throwing you on an NBA court. But I think Donovan is really up to snuff. I think we're probably likely to see more of Donovan than I think maybe people might have expected we were going to see when he got drafted as the 7th overall pick. Deni Avdija, 10 points, 6 assists, 6 rebounds, 2 steals, and a block in 21 minutes. Anfernee Simons, 10 points, 2 rebounds, 2 assists in his first preseason action. Toumani Camara, 8 points, 5 rebounds, 4 steals, a block, and an assist. You really feel Toumani's presence more just when you're watching the game and you see it on the stat sheet. I mean, he has been putting up stats in preseason, but Toumani picking up full court and forcing turnovers. He had a couple turnovers that he forced early on in the game. I think there was a backcourt violation. I think he had one of those tap the ball off the opposing player. Toumani's looked really good, and I've been saying it throughout training camp, throughout preseason. I was saying it in summer league when I was seeing some of the practices that he was participating in. Toumani, again, is another guy who I think is really forcing the hand of the coaching staff. He's playing really well. He's doing exactly what they're asking him to do. He's making a jump in his second season. And as a player who's got a few more years under his belt, too, than some of his other contemporaries as second-year guys, that's not entirely surprising, particularly with the way that Toumani ended last season. But a guy who I think you really start penciling in Toumani as kind of a building block of this team going forward because, again, he really provides kind of the stout defense, the willingness to do kind of the dirty work, an improving three-point shot, a willingness to pick up full court, and a guy who plays physical and wants to play that brand of basketball. Those guys aren't necessarily easy to find in the NBA, especially guys who have that want to and also have the skill. There's guys that are willing to do those things. They just maybe don't have the skills to match up with it. Toumani is a guy who's able to do both those things. He has the want to and the talent. And I think we're going to see a lot from Toumani this season. I think we're going to see great things out of Toumani this season. We saw it throughout all of preseason. I expect we're going to see it carrying over into the regular season. Rion Repair also came on late, 20 points. Really nice preseason for Rion. Still, working his way through the game, still making probably too many turnovers, but that's something you want to see because you want to see the confidence first. The turnovers are okay for a guy like Rion, especially. If he's going to become that point forward that I think the team envisions him becoming, you're going to have to let him go out and make some mistakes. He's made some mistakes, but he's also looked really good in the stretches as well. Really like what we've seen out of Rion in the preseason. Duop in the preseason with a 14.5 rebound, 3 steal, 2 assist performance in 23 minutes. Duop just kind of getting in where he fits in, always slots in and makes an impact in the time that he's given. And Kris Murray, 10 points, 2 rebounds, and a steal in 16 minutes. Again, I thought a pretty strong preseason for Kris Murray as well, a guy who I think is going to be driving 4 minutes in that second unit. So a real nice way to finish off the preseason for the Trailblazers. They end up going 3-1 in preseason play. They lose the first game to the Clippers, end up beating the Kings, Radio Farm Home, and the Utah Jazz to cap off their 4-game preseason schedule. And since we're wrapping up preseason, might as well wrap up the preseason edition of Betting on the Blazers. Portland Trail Blazers go 3-0 versus the spread versus the NBA teams they played in preseason. Blazers covered in all 3 of those games versus the NBA teams. I don't think they covered versus Ohm, but I think the line was set at like 25. Portland ended up winning that game 111-100. And didn't necessarily play the same lineups they would have versus an NBA team. And actually, I never actually saw a line for that game. I'm sure there existed because you can bet on anything these days. So they probably didn't cover in that one. But at least in terms of NBA competition, they covered in all 3 of those games. They were 4.5-point dogs to the Clippers and lost by just 1. They were 5.5-point dogs to the Kings and won by 20. And they were 1-point favorites versus the Utah Jazz and won by 38 points. Not entirely sure when they'll be first favored this season. That was kind of one of the Betting on the Blazers storylines last season, was how long the season went on before the Trailblazers were finally favored in a game. It might not be as long this year. We'll have to wait and see on that one. The Trailblazers over-under for the 2024-25 season is 22.5 wins, which I think is a slight uptick from last season. I think last season was 21.5 or 19.5. Either way, a little bit more. I can't give you any advice on that, but that is what the over is set at. A few of the other lines I saw as well. Blazers are plus 100,000 to win the NBA championship, plus 60,000 to win the West, plus 60,000 to win the Northwest Division. Which it seems a little bit odd to me they have the same odds to win the West as they have to win the Northwest Division, but plus 60,000 is already long shot odds anyway, so I guess I figure we'll just leave it at that. And plus 50,000 to win the Emirates Cup. So if you put any money on those and the Blazers end up winning any of those, you're doing great, but long odds are long for a reason. So that is your update on Betting on the Blazers. All season long, we will keep you updated on what the Trailblazers are doing in terms of their season over-under and whether or not they're covering on a night-to-night basis. Trailblazers squaring away a little bit of contract business before they started the 2024-25 season. On Saturday, they exercised the 2025-26 options on the rookie scale contracts of guard Shaedon Sharpe and Scoot Henderson and forward Kris Murray. Team is also expected to keep Dalano Banton on the roster, whose contract becomes partially guaranteed on Sunday after waiving Devonte Graham earlier in the week to get to 15 players, which is the max amount of players you can have under NBA contract. Blazers also have 3 players, the max, on 2-way contracts. So once again, 15 players under contract in the NBA, 3 players under contract with the Trailblazers and the Remix. So 18 players total, the max you can have. There was some discussion about maybe keeping an open roster spot, but I think they saw enough out of Dalano, particularly with some of the injuries they've had at the guard position. I figured they feel like having Dalano around makes a lot of sense. Delano's played pretty well too. His contract doesn't become fully guaranteed until, I believe, January, so they still have a decision to make on that at some point in time. But as of right now, it seems like the Trailblazers will be going into the regular season with 15 players under contract and 3 two-way players. Once again, the max for both of those. As I mentioned, I think they're probably going to keep Dalano Banton around anyways. He does give them a nice dynamic at that point guard position, something a little bit different than the other guards. But I think also one of the reasons why is because of injuries. The team announced on Friday that Matisse Thybulle underwent a procedure on Thursday to address inflammation in his right knee. He will now continue rehabilitation, is expected to miss at least 3 to 4 weeks. So the first month of the season, no Matisse. I don't believe that Matisse has been doing a whole lot in training camp or did a whole lot in training camp, didn't play in any of the preseason games. So when Matisse does come back, I imagine he's probably going to have some time rehabilitating from that injury once he's able to get back on the court. Anyways, not entirely sure what the nature of that injury is. address right knee inflammation. That could be, that could be a lot of different things. Maybe a drain, maybe going in and cleaning something up in there. I don't know. The team didn't give a whole lot of details on that, but either way, 3 to 4 weeks for Matisse Thybulle. So he's out for the start of the regular season, which is, again, would be a reason to keep some other guards around. In other injury news, or at least kind of keeping track of some of the injuries the team has and looking at those timelines, Robert Williams III is now at the 2-week time frame that was initially given for the grade 1 hamstring strain that he suffered during training camp. Rob hasn't been around the last couple of days. I hear tell that he's maybe sick right now. It was his birthday this week too, which stinks to be sick on your birthday. So I don't know exactly what that timeline is. We still need to get an update on that too. I mean, it's possible that maybe that hasn't come around as quickly as they hoped it would, but I imagine we'll get an update on Monday or Tuesday about Rob's status heading into the regular season. It'd be super cool if Rob was available to go in that game on Wednesday, but I'm guessing probably, if nothing else, he's going to need some time to kind of get back into the flow of things. I don't believe he's been participating in practices, at least not in full practices. And particularly with a guy like Rob, who has had, such an issue with injuries, they're not just going to be like, all right, Rob, go ahead and get out there in a regular season game. He's going to have to get in some practices. He's going to have to get in some rehabilitation workouts in order to get back out there. So even if the team does say that he's cleared to get back onto the court with the team, I imagine that we're probably looking at least a week, maybe 2 weeks of rehabilitation time before we see Robert Williams. Obviously, we'll get some clearance on that, I think, early in this week. But as of right now, Rob Williams is at that initial 2-week time frame. Shaedon Sharpe is also 2 weeks into the initial 4 to 6 week time frame that the team game after an MRI revealed that he had a small posterior labral tear in his left shoulder. I do get the sense that Shaedon is at least probably going to be back on the shorter end of that time frame. Again, I think we saw him, shooting at shoot-around at the Seattle game. I get the sense that Shaedon is kind of trying to push a little bit to say like, hey, I'm fine, I can play, let's go. So my gut tells me that Shaedon might be back. At least he doesn't have any setbacks earlier rather than later in that initial 4 to 6 week time frame. I think it also probably depends on how the team is playing, how they're looking, if there's any other injuries as well. Obviously, they're really going to take their time with that. Again, same thing with Shaedon as with Rob, and that, you just don't want to put him in a situation with an injury that he's already had twice. He had that shoulder issue in his rookie season summer league, and then he has it obviously early on in training camp this season. So they're going to want to be careful with that. But, I do get the sense that maybe it wasn't as serious as maybe they thought it might have been initially. And so I think that's probably good news. Again, it's injuries. It's the Trailblazers. 1, you shouldn't make any assumptions with injuries anyways. 2, just had some back luck when it comes to injuries. So I don't know that we should jinx ourselves too awful much. But I do get the sense that Shaedon is coming along well, and that hopefully he is going to be available on the earlier part of that initial time frame, which was initially set at 4 to 6 weeks. Also, Jabari Walker sat out the Jazz game with ankle soreness. I think that he's maybe sick too. I don't know that it's so much the injury as it is he just needs a little more time to kind of start feeling better. I know stuff's going around everywhere right now, so if you're out and about in public, in crowds, you're maybe catching a little bit of something. So my sense is that's why Jabari didn't play in the game versus the Jazz on Friday. But again, that's something else we'll also probably get some updates on Monday. As I understand it, no media availability this weekend for the Trailblazers, but they will have practice on Monday and Tuesday in preparation for Wednesdays. So again, we'll have some updates on injuries and who's going to be available on opening night early next week. All right, well, let's go ahead and hear from rookie Trailblazers center Donovan Clingan. I talked to Donovan a few days ago about his rookie season so far, training camp, what his life's been like since Summer League, coming to Portland after spending the first 20 years of his life in Connecticut, kind of some of his thoughts on the center rotation, how play is coming along for him, the Kling Kong nickname, which is something that, has been kind of getting floated out there a couple times, get his thoughts on that, and just kind of what he's hoping to see out of himself and from the team in the first month of the season. Donovan, a great kid, and really enjoyed talking to him. Really good perspective. I thought, he had some comments after the Utah game. Chauncey Billups had said that, he kind of challenged Donovan early in the game. Walker Kessler beat him for a rebound, and Chauncey was like, hey, man, like you can't get beat like that for a rebound. And I think Donovan's the kind of player who really kind of responds to being challenged like that. And his response to that was coming out and getting 20 rebounds, 14 points, 4 blocks, looked great in that game. I thought outplayed Walker Kessler. And that's just kind of what you want out of a young player, particularly a young center, you got to have a bit of an edge to you when you're a center. Guys are always trying you. They're always going at your chest. And so I think Donovan just has kind of the right mentality to be a young center in the NBA. I'm expecting great things from Donovan Clingan. Really enjoyed talking to him. So here's what Donovan Clingan had to say earlier this week about his first couple months as a Portland Trailblazer. All right, here with Donovan Clingan. So Donovan, first off, one, thank you for joining me. And two, what's life been like for you since Summer League got over?
It's been crazy, really just the work that I've been putting in to try to get my body right, try to get my game right, to, go out there and compete against, the best of the best. I've been traveling a lot. I've been, just trying to learn as much as I can because this is a whole new level and, I'm going to have to take a big jump in order to find minutes on the floor and compete. And, I got to get better in order to, just go out there and make plays.
That's an interesting perspective, I think, because I think a lot of times people assume, like, well, you're a top 10 pick, like, obviously you're a winner, you're a two-time national championship. I could see people in your situation assuming, like, well, yeah, I'm going to have to work, but, like, I assume I'm probably just going to get some minutes because, who I am, and it sounds like you're kind of approaching it from a different perspective.
Yeah, college is a whole nother level from the NBA. NBA is, 400 or 500 of the best players in the world, and, college, there's a lot more players that that will never see an NBA floor. So, it's a certain few that make it to the NBA because of how hard they work, and there's a certain few that go on to sign multiple contracts because of how hard they work. People that just stay complacent or happy with where they're at. They don't go on and sign those big contracts and win big things. So I just want to continue to get better because I know I have a lot in me, and there's a lot more I could do, and I just want to keep expanding my game in every way possible.
You talk about putting in work and getting your body right. What were some of the things that you wanted to address in the offseason before you got to training camp?
Yeah, really just working on my feet, trying to get quicker defensively, offensively, more explosive, faster, for quick dunks and lobs and all that stuff. Really just finding my shot consistently, and really just trying to build a connection with all the guards, with all my teammates. It's coming from college. You're playing with a bunch of NBA guys, people who are all-stars, and some of the best in the league. And you really just have to find ways to play with them, and how they want you to play for them to succeed. And so it's really just trying to pick up little things and trying to help teammates to perform at the highest level.
How much work did you kind of put in with the team before you guys got to training camp? I know you guys had a few small mini camps, it looks like. You talk about traveling and things of that nature, but it seemed like you were putting in quite a bit of work this offseason as well.
Yeah, I put a lot of work in this offseason. Really just building the connection with these guys. We were doing a bunch of different little mini camps and, just playing with each other, working out with each other, because, that's how you build that relationship. If you could do it in these small moments and, when there's no fans, you build that connection. When you go out there on the court in the big stage, if you guys have that strong connection, then nothing should be able to stop you.
You grew up in Connecticut. You go to UConn. Now you're playing basketball in Portland, which is all the way across the country. Like, how has that been for you? Like, I won't say, like, you're away from home, but, like, it kind of a little bit.
Yeah, no, for sure. It's definitely weird being 3,000 miles from home, but, it's the first time in 20 years that I've, really been, out of Connecticut. But, it's been going good. I love it out here. I was kind of excited, when I was going to NBA because it's time to move away and, start a new chapter. So, I feel like I'm taking advantage of it. I'm working hard. I'm, trying to find ways every day to get better on and off the court. So, really it's just trying to be the best version of myself and really just adjusting to living life on my own.
Do you have a support system out here? Because I know sometimes like guys come out and the person with them or so just to kind of help them make that transition.
One of my friends, he was the manager at UConn, played against him in high school. He's from the town over from me. He's out here with me. And then, my girlfriend travels out here a bunch.
So training camp, how's it gone for you? What's been your take from training camp and the work you guys put in, the work you put in individually as well? Yeah,
training camp's been good. We've been putting a lot of work in, really just trying to find what we got to do to win games this year and, really just trying to build connections with everyone. We've been working really hard. Coach Chauncey's been pushing us really hard. And, I feel like every day we come in the gym, we know we have to get better. And, I feel like we can walk out of the gym knowing that we got better. All these coaches here push us. Chauncey's got a great game plan for us. He's got a great idea for how we're going to play this year. And, I'm really excited.
The first 2 preseason games, how do you feel like you did in those? What was the speed like for you? How did you feel from those games?
I think I did all right. First game adjusting to the NBA game. Obviously played summer league. Obviously, did a training camp and all that stuff. But you're going against the top guys now. You're playing at game speed, and it's a whole nother level. The pace, how fast it is. It's really fast, and I feel like I've been doing well defensively, just having an impact in the paint, offensively screening and rolling to the rim. Really just right now through these preseason games, just trying to pick up the style, like how the games are played, and what I could do to keep working throughout these couple, these next 2 weeks before the season officially tips off.
Yeah, I mean, in those first 2 preseason games, you got Zubac, you got Sabonis, like some pretty good NBA centers going up against. And granted, it's preseason, but everyone's trying to put their best foot forward. How did that go for you?
I feel like it went good. Zubac being one of the strongest bigs in the league. His strength and physicality. And Sabonis with his skill, his strength. He can pass the ball. Better than a lot of bigs in the league. And I feel like I held my own just with the physicality. Defensively, I feel like I held my own. And so really just. It's just to go out there and play well against these big players. It gives me the confidence to keep going out there and doing it.
I feel like I saw growth from you from just the first preseason game to the second preseason game. Did you feel that at all?
Yeah, I think defensively mostly. Defensively, I feel like I grew a lot from that first game, just knowing what I had to do, how deep I had to be, and that drop coverage and everything I just had to do to help my team win. And I feel like from game 1 to game 2, I learned a lot.
One of the things that I think, the coaches probably got into you guys a little about was about guys getting back and beating you guys in transition. As a big and as someone who really kind of makes your bones defensively, how do you feel about that? Because granted, I know that, the center's usually not going to be the first guy back, but I imagine in some respects you're thinking, I wish I had gotten back.
Yeah, I mean, it just makes you, after those couple of possessions, watching the film, you just got to realize you got to run harder back on defense, in transition. As a big, you got to protect the rim, you got to protect the paint. So, for me, I got to get back and do everything I can to protect that rim.
What's your relationship been like with the other centers on the team? Pretty good center rotation on this team, and seems like kind of you guys all bring a little something different to it.
Yeah, I mean, we have a great relationship. DA, Rob, and Wop. Us four, we're always talking, we're always messing around, we're always pushing each other in practice. We're just trying to make each other better every day, and the only way to do that is compete.
Thank you, Shaedon, for the heavy ball dribbles too. That's very good for the audio. Yeah, I kind of asked you this during the pre-draft process, or kind of when you first got here. It seems like big men are kind of back. The guys in the NBA now. It seems like pace and space is still important, but it seems like centers are kind of becoming more important now.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like a lot of people are realizing how impactful and important big men are. Rebounding, screens. Certain bigs facilitating, shooting, and really just, the dominance of bigs. Having that presence in the paint, helps your defense so much. And, I feel like I just want to help bring the bigs back.
Yeah. Do you think at all about Rookie of the Year? Is that something that you think about or drives you?
It's always something. I feel like it's in the back of my mind, something that would be, a great accomplishment. I feel like for me, it's just how can I get better? How can I help my team win? And if I win accolades, I win accolades, and I'll be happy, I'll be proud of that. But for me, it's just about winning and trying to help my team win.
What do you think about DA? His personality, especially. He's a character, man.
Yeah, DA is one of one. He's got a lot of energy every day. He'll tell you everything straight up, and whether it's good, bad. But he's always teaching me little things, and to have him as my vet and someone to look up to every day is means a lot to me, because he's had a great career, and he still has a good career in front of him, and I'm really blessed to have DA and Rob and Wop around me, teaching me and helping me get used to this league.
I was going to ask you about the Kling Kong nickname, but I just noticed too you sold some Kling Kong merch last year, so I assume that it's a nickname that you're all right with.
Yeah, last year it kind of just blew up. Everyone at UConn started calling me Kling Kong, and I started making merch, and a lot of people were buying it, so I kept it going.
I was going to say, Trailblazer fans loved buying merch, so if you did a second run, I bet you could move some product.
I'll find something. I'll definitely think of something for sure.
Is it hard to buy waders as a 7'3" guy?
I don't have any. I need to
don't
find a pair. No, I don't have any. 'Cause I can't. I
guess you can just pull your pants up, I guess, because, if you are 7'3", so.
Water's cold, man.
It is. It's cold. Last one, just your hopes for the first month of the season. I think a lot of times, when you think about an entire season, it's too hard. So, breaking it down into smaller pieces, I feel like makes some sense, particularly for young players.
Yeah, for the first month, really, is just figuring out how this league is, what I could do to get better. Every night, improve on to 5 more minutes, to be more impactful, help my team win, and, really just trying to be the best version of myself. So, and really just taking all the coaching I can to have them, teach me the right thing to do and put me in the right positions. I know they're going to put me in the right positions, but, I just got to make sure I execute right and just keep learning every day.
There you go. Great stuff from Donovan Clingan. And again, a guy who just has a real positive outlook on things. And, you can kind of understand that from kind of some things happen in his life. Obviously, being a 7'3" guy, losing his mom at a young age. I think, those things tend to shape you, I think, and I think that Donovan's family did a great job. He's a great young man. I'm really looking forward to working with him this season. I think he's going to be a great player, and I think he's just going to provide the Portland Trailblazers with a lot of things they've needed. The notion of stout interior defense and rim protection, something that the Blazers just haven't had a whole lot of lately. And they do have a great center rotation. If Rob's able to get out there and stay healthy, you really like what he's able to give you. Again, I'm expecting really big things of Deandre Ayton, but Deandre kind of more of an offensive center. I mean, a very good two-way center, and you're going to hear from him actually later next week in an interview I did with him about kind of some of his goals in terms of being a two-way player. But in Donovan, you have a guy who he's always going to be a defensive-minded player, and his offense is going to be something he's going to be able to utilize, but you're really always going to see the best parts of who Donovan Clingan is on the floor, on the defensive end. And when, again, you're serious about becoming a better defensive team, if that's something that, really isn't lip service, you have to go out and get players who are going to be great defensive players. And sometimes that means maybe, not getting a guy who's maybe as talented offensively, who just is deficient on the defensive end. And I think typically, particularly in the NBA, usually you go that direction. If it's this guy's a great offensive player, he's a great defensive player, you can pick one, which one you're going to take. Typically teams go with the offensive player because you need to score points to win games. But when you feel like you already have some of those elements squared away offensively, and the Blazers do have a talented offensive team with guys like Anfernee Simons, Jerami Grant, Deandre Ayton, Deni Avdija now, I think you have to look at the other side of the ball, and that's what the Blazers did when they selected Donovan Clingan with the 7th overall pick in this most recent draft. So I'm expecting really good things out of Donovan Clingan. Really enjoyed talking to him, and hope you enjoyed the interview as well. And that's going to do it for this edition of The Briefcase. Thank you so much for joining me. As always, new editions throughout the season, a couple times a week. If nothing else, please like and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You got The Briefcase, you got the Blazers Balcony, you got Section 113 on the Trailblazers Podcast Network. Go to trailblazers.com to find out information on how to subscribe to all those podcasts. Thank you so much for joining me. We'll talk to you later on next week. I'm Casey Holdahl. Go Blazers.
Thanks for listening to The Briefcase. Catch you next time.